everybody, and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be talking about Action Comics issue 1097, written by Mark Waid, with art by Skylar Patridge, colors by Ivan Placencia, and letters by Steve Wands. The reign of the Superboys continues as Clark is blasted out of the Museum of Tomorrow by a punch that actually hurt him, something that he's seldom had happen before. Stopping himself before blasting into a storefront, he returns to the museum to find a Martian Manhunter, Booster Gold, and Mary Marvel battling the giant gold robot, barely holding out a defense against it. Superman helps out Booster, realizing that these people know who he is, but he doesn't recognize them at all. Superboy tries to take charge of the situation, but in return is blasted by the robot's energy beams. Again, something that actually hurts him. The robot recognizes Superman is a teenager here, which marks the perfect opportunity for something. Waid just kind of throwing us into the battle with the giant robot is great, since Superboy is our POV character and has been through Action Comics for some time now, so he and us have no clue what's going on, why it's happening, and it never feels that we know more than what the characters know. We kind of learn it all at the same time, so we never feel like we are constantly waiting for the story to catch up to us. We do learn that the bad guy's name is Epoch, which is the same name as a villain who calls himself the Lord of Time, although that was like a guy in like a grey suit of armor. I think he was in Justice League Odyssey from a couple of years ago. I think that's the last time I remember seeing him. I guess this is the same guy, he's just got an updated design because the universe has gone through a couple of different crises and changes since Justice League Odyssey. Epoch manages to escape and Superboy is left to question who these heroes are, but Mary shuts Booster up before he can say anything spoilerish, letting Manhunter take charge and introduce them all as his friends, or one day they will be his friends. Surprisingly, the heroes actually do reveal who they are exactly. We get kind of like the quick rundown of each of the heroes. So if you aren't familiar with any of them, you kind of get caught up on who Manhunter is, who Mary Marvel is, and who Booster Gold is. Clark also finds out about Epoch, the Lord of Time, and Manhunter reveals that they were on a time travel mission when they ran into Epoch and his time stream, which ran right into theirs and shattered their way of travel, and while they fought, Booster was able to send out a distress call that Superboy heard through the strange machine in the museum, and upon activating it, it drew them to him. Clark questions why they were headed to his timeline and what the device is, and Manhunter figured that it was from Krypton, but Clark has no idea what or who Krypton is. I figured we were in a time before Clark had actually learned about his heritage, since it actually has not come up at all in Mark Waid's tenure on the book, but I didn't think Mark Waid would be using this story to jump on into it and actually bring the alien heritage side of Clark into this story as maybe like a giant plot point, because obviously he's got to learn about who he is, and that hasn't happened yet, and we're very close to the point where he will, so I imagine this is the story that is going to happen in. Manhunter asks Superboy if he can talk privately with his allies, hoping the young hero won't eavesdrop. Superboy agrees not to, and Manhunter asks Mary and Booster about what's going on, since they were on the tail of some alpha energy signatures, the same energy Superman was imbued with when he fought Darkseid and won and remade their world. Mary thinks that Epoch was polluting the time stream and threw Booster's search off, so they need to deal with Epoch before he decides to kill Superboy before he can become Superman and thus change their entire world. Manhunter hopes that Booster can refrain from dishing out spoilers as he changes into his human form alongside Mary. Booster, though, doesn't have any civilian clothes to change into since he needs to maintain his brand, but is forced to stop by the souvenir shop of the museum to find some casual clothes. I'm really liking the Back to the Future setup here with Manhunter, Mary, and Booster. They gotta help Clark not reveal too much about his future and what happens in it. At least not yet. They'll probably give him little clues about what happens and stuff that maybe isn't as important as, oh, you're going to marry Lois Lane and have a child. Stuff which this Superboy has actually seen already, since in the Summer of Superman he caught a glimpse of his future. But I'm all for this setup. It's an interesting setup, and I really like the team that Mark Waid chose to put on this mission. It's an interesting team. Booster Gold is probably the one that makes the most sense, since he's got some ties with Superman. He was rescued rescued by Superman from the Absolute Universe, so he's kind of like paying his dues back after turning into Darkseid and trying to wreak havoc on the universe, so he feels obligated to try and help Superman. Manhunter is Superman's friend, one of his best and most loyal friends, so it makes sense. Mary is the odd one out, the one who doesn't actually really have any interaction with Superman. It's always Billy, it's always Shazam who has the interaction. So that's quite interesting. I quite like that angle that he wanted to give Mary some sort of connection to Superman. It also probably helps that Mary is around the same age as Superboy is here. So there's some sort of familial relation going on there where they, kind of get each other because they're, teenagers. They understand what each other is and what they want. Clark takes his new friends back home, introducing John, Mary, and Michael to Ma and Pa Kent, saying that they are friends from the future. Ma and Pa take this in their stride, being that their son is from another world, and listen to the new heroes. I do wonder how much this will change his relation to the Legion, since right now it's non-existent because the Legion are still like reforming and remaking themselves after Darkseid kind of wiped them off the map. So I imagine that is coming up, that the Legion come in contact with Superboy and he goes to the future and we get the Legion stories and all that sort of stuff. But I wonder if this kind of throws that off, because to my knowledge, the Legion are usually the first people who have time travel that Clark interacts with. But now it's, these people who are his friends, who he's on the Justice League with. So that's quite interesting. And maybe that's like that triggers the Legion coming back to see him or something. I'm interested to see what Mark Waid's going to do with that, because I'm fairly certain he is writing some Legion stuff. And there is an announced Legion book coming at some point. So I guess he's planting the seeds for all of that sort of stuff here. As the heroes talk with Ma and Pa, Clark heads up to the roof, running through the last day's events in his head when Mary comes and joins him, apologizing for staring since she isn't used to seeing Superman with glasses on. Clark has millions of questions, but Mary cannot answer a single one of them, but she needs Clark to know that whatever happens is not carved in stone, and they deal with paradoxes and reboots of reality all the time. There is a really funny meta line there about Mary pitying anyone who ever tries to write a history about their world, because in universe, Barry Allen in the present is actually doing that in the world, and in our world, Mark Waid wrote the new history of the DCU book, which was from Barry's point of view. So I kind of like that meta knock at what he was doing, because I imagine it was pretty fucking hard to kind of wrangle everything that's been going on. Mary talks about Superman being Clark Kent, something that she never would have guessed, since once he put his street clothes on, he's not Superman anymore, like quite literally, since his voice gets higher, his glasses dulled his vivid blue eyes, and even starts moving differently, almost like he was very shy about who he was. I love that Waid, a handful of issues ago, set up Clark's secret identity when he first started becoming Superboy, going through stuff like the glasses and the clothes that he wears. But I like that he's also talking about stuff like, Clark talks differently when he's Superman. Clark, carries himself differently when he's Clark. He's a bit more hunched over and a bit shy, kind of hiding who he is, kind of hiding his body frame. Stuff like that only someone, a super nerd like Mark Waid would ever think about, and stuff I've thought about before as well, like how the secret identity works in a more modern setting. And I like that he's going through this, and it's why I love Mark as a writer, because he puts that stuff in his storyline, because he knows people will pick it apart and be like, why didn't someone see him because of this or that? He's thought about it because he is such a fucking super nerd. Clark admits it was something that he drilled into himself, and he worries constantly about blowing his secret, something which is a lot of pressure all the time. He asks Mary if he always has this secret, but Mary cannot answer that, instead wanting to know about Lana Lang. The next day, Manhunter meets with Booster, who is confused by the farm since in the future where he's from, they don't have farms, and he finds it all rather boring. John reminds him that they are there just a couple of decades away from their present day, so it's not as though they're in the prehistoric times. Booster asks John if he could go and find his past self and tell him something to prevent something from happening, and what would that be? but John changes the subject, apologizing to Michael for sending him alone to investigate the Omega Rift, which led him to being trapped on the Absolute Earth and then eventually possessed by Darkseid. John knows that he is still traumatized from what Darkseid and the Absolute Legion did to him, and he doesn't have to pretend everything is okay and put up shields around himself by acting like it's all cool, because it's not. But Booster knows he has to do that in order to survive. I'm really glad we are dipping into Booster's mindset and, the ramifications for Booster being possessed by Darkseid and kind of, doing all this DCKO stuff that we saw him do, where he was trying to, destroy the world and everything. Obviously, that's not Booster, it was the Darkseid possessing him. But I am very glad that we are looking into that sort of stuff and exploring Michael and what he's going through in his mind, because he has this great remorse, obviously, because he felt he probably let the heroes down and, Superman had to come rescue him. So now he's going on this mission to search for Superman as a way to repay the hero. I'm also really excited just to see what Wade has in store for Booster, because whenever Booster is written in a book or is brought up in some book or something as a character who's part of the story, he never seems to really get much. He's always just really there just because, time traveler, he adds a little bit of, levity to a book because he's quite funny. But I like that Wade might actually be doing something with what Scott Snyder and Joshua Williamson were doing with him in Superman and DCKO respectively, and actually build some unique direction for him now that's not just a quippy guy from the future who's capitalizing on being a hero. Ma Kent soon calls the heroes in for breakfast, and John is excited since he's sat at Martha Kent's table a number of times and Booster is in for a treat. The heroes enjoy a home-cooked meal and are a little surprised that Ma Kent actually understands the whole time travel shenanigans at play, being she has seen a lot of the time travel films that Clark likes, and also just loves UFOs and space in general, being her son is from space. Pa asks the question Ma won't. Can the heroes tell them where Clark is from? But John will only say that learning that is part of Clark's journey, and they will all just tell him that he came in a rocket, which the Kents know because it almost hit their car. Clark wants to talk about the strange device from the Space Museum and wonders if it's some type of radio of sorts. John wants to investigate it more, but Epoch soon appears above the farm, prompting the heroes to engage with him. Wade is really skirting right up to Clark's heritage and the revelations that he'll get once he learns he's from Krypton, and I like that that's being worked into the storyline where it's obviously going to be something that we haven't seen before maybe, or something has changed because the universe is, changing around Clark. Hell, even Epoch could probably change something just being there. Maybe there's something that he changes in Superman's past that will affect his future and, turn him evil, make it so he just doesn't exist or stops being a hero or something. There is a wealth of possibilities here with these time travel storylines. I'm intrigued to see where Wade's going with it. The heroes keep Epoch away from the farmhouse, with Superboy tackling him into the cornfields, and the other heroes immediately surrounding him to keep him off balance. Epoch thinks that they are just wasting what little time they have in their lives trying to fight him, wanting them to stop as he activates a force conversion field, shielding himself from the hero's onslaught. The villain lashes out and grabs Superboy, intending on killing him then and there, but is blasted in the head by a shotgun by Pa Kent, who demands the villain get away from his son. Clark warns him to stay back as the villain has advanced weaponry, but the villain begins to disappear back into the time stream, telling the heroes that he's barely begun to arm himself with what weapons he has. The heroes stay on alert since he could reappear at any moment, and the villain does, this time in the Kent's barn across the field. Clark races into the barn, realizing what the villain went for as he finds that Epoch has stolen his rocket ship, disappearing back into the timeline with it. So I guess they are going to go on a bit of a time travel adventure with Superboy, probably to get the rocket back, and I guess Epoch is going to go further back in time to change Clark's past. Maybe he's going to go back to Krypton's destruction and ensure that Clark doesn't make it off the planet. Something like that. Something's going to happen to Superboy where they have to protect his timeline and ensure that he survives. And that's really cool. And I, as I said before, I really love the dynamic of the three heroes that Mark Waid selected for this mission, especially because they cover a really unique set of people. So you've got like Booster Gold, who who is a character who is kind of inspired by Superman, looks up to him as a bit of a fanboy. Manhunter, who's very good friends with Clark, they bond over being the last of their kind and stuff like that. And then you have Mary Marvel, who has had no interactions with Superman really whatsoever, so she's kind of like the newbie, the one who's kind of learning all of this new stuff about Superman, kind of like the new reader. And like all of these characters each represent a different type of reader, and I thought that was quite interesting, and I'm intrigued to see what other stuff they do with these characters in the coming issues. Action Comics issue 1097 took the reign of the Superboy's storyline in an interesting new direction as we head into a time travel adventure alongside a really unique and interesting set of characters to go on said adventure with Superboy. I'm really liking the dynamic that Wade is writing with Manhunter, Mary Marvel, and Booster Gold alongside Superboy. They each bring a unique perspective on not just being a superhero, but also their relation to Superman and how they interact with Superboy is really interesting. Epoch also getting to be the villain is interesting because it's such a classic Mark Waid deep cut pull that no one ever really expected. And the new design for him is really interesting. I quite like it, and I'm intrigued to see if he's going to evolve over the course of the storyline as he tries to take down Superboy before he even becomes Superman. I'm going to give this issue an 8 out of 10.